Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So this time we're going to be talking about flying. And why are we talking about flying? Well, there is a post from Bashiok, a very long one, and I just thought it's worthy of discussion, and I've got plenty of points to bring, he's got plenty of points to bring, and it's just worth having a chat about it. Now one thing, if we're 20 seconds through the video, if you are right now zooming down to the comment section, just stop and listen. You know, I wish YouTube had a feature where you could disable comments for people who haven't watched like the majority of the video, but that just seems to happen a kind of disappointing amount of time. Just one little thing to mention, Bashiok did say that in terms of when flying will be implemented again for Warlords, he said they don't know, and he doesn't have any definite answers, especially before they have began full-on testing. Basically, it seems like the initial plan now is no flying in Warlords of Draenor whatsoever, but that may change depending on how the expansion plays out. Anyway, so, no flying. Well, this post does kind of lead to a little bit more of a confirmation of it not being there, at least their initial plan being to not have it in the expansion at all. Previously, all we had was a tweet from Alex Safrasabi saying that, but with Bashiok sort of jumping in, it does lend a little bit of credence to that thought. Now, personally, I'm okay with it. Let's just talk about why flying was introduced to the game in the first place. We'll try to go a little bit more chronological in this. So, back in vanilla World of Warcraft, flight points were bad. Now, if you think that current flight points are bad, then you didn't play in vanilla. You really didn't play in vanilla, because they were bad. They were really bad. I didn't actually play a lot in vanilla. I more played through a friend of mine. Basically, I jump on his account from time to time in a local LAN center, and that's how I initially got into Warcraft. But anyway, the flight points were terrible. But people did see from these flight points that you could hop on a griffin and go somewhere fast, so they wanted that feature in the next expansion. And in vanilla Warcraft, traveling was just a bit of a bitch in general. It was hard to get places, and flight points, in terms of how spread out they were in zones, were sometimes just, ugh, they were really bad. You would have there would be like times when a zone would only have one flight point in it, but the quest hub might be the other side of the zone. Crazy stuff like that was going on, and that's why players initially were just like, guys, Blizzard, we want to be able to fly, just let us make our own flight points, because damn it, we're going to do a better job than you. And you know what, I think that was a fair enough point back then. So, flying was added into the game in the Burning Crusade, and initially I think you got it at level 70, your flying mount was pretty slow, I think it went 60%, whereas your regular, like, fast ground mount would go 100%. So, or at least, you know, not the epic mount. So that meant that, yeah, you could use your flying mount to go to some of the cool places in Netherstorm or something like that, but if you were just going from place X to Y with not much in the way of mobs in between either places, you could just hop in your regular mount and go and it would still be faster. That at least preserved a little bit of the gameplay and the sort of reason for using a normal mount. But then, of course, once you got epic flying, that was it. You were always in the sky. You were never really on the ground anymore, at all. Really, ever. There was no reason to be. People always play the most efficient way, but people don't always play the way that is most fun to them, because our brains just seem to be kind of hardwired to efficiency. If we can do something faster, then we will do it that way, even if it kind of compromises the game design in some ways. So what were the negative things that this flying brought? These are definitely things that I'm kind of sad about, and I think a lot of the nostalgia for my old days of playing the game do come from the times when I would see some really cool stuff going on the ground that it just doesn't happen anymore. So, because everyone just was flying from point to point as was the most efficient manner, zones at max level completely dead, completely empty. There could be 20-30 people in a zone, but it wouldn't matter because you just wouldn't see them anywhere. They wouldn't be actually experiencing the zone or using the zone or doing anything within it. It was just empty. And I think that's one of the things that I've really noticed the most, in that the world of Warcraft doesn't have too many people in it, really, and that's, okay, unless you're on an ultra-high pop server, yeah, but in general, World of Warcraft just doesn't feel like it's full of other humans, and one of the cornerstones of an MMO is that you can just meet people, and I think that really just led to zones just feeling a little bit desolate. I didn't like it, and I still don't like it. It's a bit of a pity, and there's times, you know, I'm just flying through the world thinking, there's no one here. Like, the only people that I seem to ever talk to or bump into is the odd person that I team up with in the Timeless Isles, and my guild, and that's it. I think that's something that's kind of sad, and that's definitely an aspect of the game that was removed through flying. And this really boils down into many other things that I think, with Warlords having no flying, will be a lot more cool. I remember one really, really memorable time, actually. That's a terrible sentence, but whatever. In Dalaran. And this was back when you couldn't fly in Dalaran. You'd be flying outside Dalaran, but then you'd land on Krasus Landing, and once you land there, you're on your ground mount while you're in the city. But lots of cool things happened because of that. I remember a 400-person mammoth train that even some Horde people joined into. It was very fun. And just all these little cool things that have happened numerous times in zones where flying was restricted, but just haven't really happened much in Pandaria or Cataclysm or anything like that, because why would you ever go and do your classy little mammoth circle train conga line thingy? There's no reason anymore. You just fly from point to point, even within a city. You like walk outside a shop door, get in your mount, fly upwards to the next shop. You don't navigate the city, you don't spend time in that place. There's no sense of world. It's basically, World of Warcraft to me has really boiled down to just node to node, with node being place you want to go to. So from mob to mob, from door to door of a building, whatever. It's just it's kind of killed that. And there are going to be some really cool things enabled by everyone being on the ground. First of all, in those few realms that, due to connections and things like that, do actually have a balanced faction, there'll be a little bit more kind of player clashes there, and I think that could be cool. But more importantly, with there being world bosses, people aren't just going to fly right to the world boss's spawn and wait for it. No, they're going to have to, leave their garrisons or leave the main city or whatever, hop on their get in a flight point first, and then after that hop on their mounts and go on a giant epic kind of quest. There's not many instances in the game now where you just see a small army of players riding out to do a thing. Imagine Shav Pride if, before the Shav Pride, you and your small army just went in a giant feckin' crusade from the Vale, or not from the Vale, I don't know, just from one of the flight point areas to that. I just think a sense of world building, and there's something special about that. One of those special things in an MMO which just makes a moment really memorable. That doesn't happen anymore at all. Which is a pity, because, sure, nowadays you might have 40 people flying to the Shav Pride or whatever, but because they're all flying, you never bump into them. It's not the same. It's just not the same, really. So there's one thing in terms of flying and just what it's going to do to the open world. Another thing that's worth mentioning too is that if you were to take, say, the Timeless Isles, and imagine if you could fly in the Timeless Isles, all that would happen is you would go from chest to chest to chest to chest, node to node to node to node. That's it. There would be no terrain there in the Timeless Isle, because right now the terrain of the Isle is a thing you have to navigate, the mob densities are a thing you have to navigate, all these various things which do add gameplay, as much as some people, maybe say that gameplay's not great, but it adds something there. And if the world just turned into that, then all World of Warcraft would be in Warlords is you turning on Gatherer, adding a whole bunch of nodes for the various rare events and treasure chests, and just flying in a circle. That's what the game would be. Whereas if you're on the ground, first of all, you need to traverse your way to these various things. That can mean that Blizzard can actually put a little bit more of a reward. So if you're on a ground mount, right, and you're just going to go to some remote part of a zone, fight your way through some stuff, get a treasure chest. Well, what Blizzard are able to do is, because that will take you, say, 5 times longer than it's going to while you're just going, from node to node on a flying mount, they can actually put something really cool in that chest. So that chest is a true reward for what you've done. Whereas nowadays, you just don't get that feeling at all. A little bit like in the Isle of Thunder. I remember the first time I found a chest there, I was pretty damn excited, because that chest opened up gameplay with the loot scenario, and even the second and third time I found a chest, I was really happy, because I was going, searching various areas of those chests, on my ground mount, traversing the world, going to all the different places, and I thought that was a lot more fun than just being able to fly from chest to chest. That's not cool, at all. So yeah, in terms of that kind of more Timeless Isle open style of gameplay, they'll be able to balance things a lot better without flying. They'll be able to just make them better in a lot of ways. That really is important. I think that's just going to add a bit of fun to the max level. It's going to be a little bit more explorative, because even if you do know where things spawn, if you still have to like traverse a path to get there, then it's different from just going from location to location on a flying mount, because you still have to go through the world and do things within the world and based on it, rather than just, you know, sort of, in a way, map hack your way from location to location. If you replace the word flying mount with map hack, really they have the same gameplay consequence, different connotation, but same gameplay consequence if you think about it. Well, since this video is based off what since this video was spurred on by what Bashiok said, I may as well just quote him here. So he said, "Being able to lift off and fly over content compromises many of our goals in how the game world is approached, how it's played, how it's consumed, and how content is designed to account for these factors. As an example, let us consider a quest to assassinate an enemy leader. From the ground, you have to approach a fort with guards at the gate. You charge and are able to dispatch them and sneak your way into a side hall. You then methodically take out the packs of roaming sentries, and then some of them shout as they run towards you. You notice they're in the middle of practicing a dark and forbidden magic, so you take a minute to disrupt your ritual. Dashing into the main courtyard, you spot your target, sneak to him, fight through him, and then kill him. Killing the captain, vanquishing the fort, and as the guards are alerted, you fight your way out, glorious and triumphant in your success. Alternatively, from a flying mount, you fly over the gates, see some guy whose name is highlighted, land on top of him, kill him, and then fly away." I think his main point there is that some of the flying mount gameplay basically removed the fantasy of being, at the very core, a hero in an RPG completing quests. It just took that away. You kind of became this, like, weird celestial Mike Ehrmantraut style thing that just assassinates stuff for the fun of it. You weren't a warrior, you weren't a mage, you were just this, like, cosmic cleanup service. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And then another great point that he made is that it's got to the point where, because the efficiency trade-off with flying has just been so out of whack, that people are actually frustrated to engage in combat, and they're frustrated to play the actual game as it's intended. I think there's a serious problem there, and this is not really all players' fault. This is totally Blizzard's fault for not having the foresight to see this, but I think it's absolutely something they understand now and that they completely regret. And I'm still just convinced that the outdoor style content they're going to be doing in Warlords would be crap if you could fly. And also do remember, the entire of Draenor is going to be like the Timeless Isle. It's going to be a bit more spread out because the Timeless Isle, as I think we would all agree, was too small. But it's going to be more spread out. It's going to have treasure chests and random things, events, rare bosses, all this stuff. And with it being more spread out, with you being on the ground, it's just going to feel a little bit less like this. It's really nearly like this weird piñata, the Timeless Isle, where you're just running from thing to thing to thing as quick as you can because it's so small. Well, the stuff's spread out and a lot more traversal, with the ground mounts, I think it should be a lot more fun. So, yeah, it's that whole skipping content thing is something that he talked about. Bashiok also made a really good point about just the kind of transition between the leveling content and then the very, like, max level content. Basically, it's kind of abrupt, because you hit max level and boom, it's all arenas, battlegrounds, dungeons, and that kind of thing. There's no real world stuff there. Well, he said that because of the way they're designing the world with all that, you know, stuff I've talked about beforehand, with the Timeless Isle style of chests and rare mobs and all that stuff, well, because that's there, it's going to facilitate a quest-style experience throughout the world at max level that's a good bit more robust than daily quests. And then he said that they don't really think that having all of this content inside buildings, or constantly challenged by sky cannons, magical no-flying smoke, or dismount bubbles, is really a very good solution for doing it at all, because he actually said that World of Warcraft is not a flight sim, and that's just not the content that they want the game to be about. I think I absolutely agree. Times when they've had to put in a no-fly cannon or something like that have just been a pain in the arse. I think you all remember in Wrath of the Lich King when you were flying and you just happened to clip a little bit of Winter Grasp and plummet to your death. That wasn't fun, or maybe just those times you got onto your flying mount in the Kasserang Wilds and just got blasted by those sky turrets. I don't think they were particularly fun instances, and I don't think that's a good way of doing it. And then, of course, he also said there about they don't want World of Warcraft to be a flight sim, so I think that mounted flying combat would be a bad way of doing it, because look, we've all played vehicle combat, and it's fun for its own little gimmicky thing, but I don't think it could really hold up as a standalone, like, really important mechanic that would be integral to flying in the game. Then I guess another thing, just in terms of being on the ground, everything, in my opinion anyway, nearly everything in World of Warcraft looks better from the ground, perhaps with the exception of some vistas. But running through a city looks cooler from the ground because you're in a city. Going up the 1,000 stairs or whatever it is to the place where Rathian chills out, your first time through when you weren't flying, that was really cool. There's a lot of experiences which only really work with that different perspective. So that's another bonus that we're going to have being limited to the ground. But what's the biggest concern, and the concern that I have not talked about so far in this video, that I'm sure a million people will have already commented on by the time they've even reached here, yeah, flight points. They are what worries us. They are the reason, I think bad flight points are one of the reasons why flying mounts were put into the game. Flight points are better now, but they are still kinda terrible. In fact, they're really terrible. I don't even understand how Blizzard have managed to have the current flight points be so terrible. Look, like, we even, for a project actually, programmed in C++ this thing, which would essentially, it would give you like a map with a whole bunch of points on it, and those points were randomly generated, and what our algorithm had to do was calculate, it was like what point is closest to something else or whatever, and then, of course, the real sort of meat of that project was making it as efficient as possible. But the actual algorithm to work out of a series of flight points that you have unlocked, what the quickest way from place X to place Y is, that's a very simple algorithm, and it's not in the game. It's not in the game. And I think one of the reasons why it's not in the game is because they've kind of been hard-coding flight points currently. And they've been doing that so they have this kind of really, like, scenic route. Now, Bashiok has straight up said, and this is a quote, "The flight points in Draenor are not going to be loop-de-loop sightseeing tours. And we're going to be looking to our beta testers to know if anything, if any of them are less than tip-top." So what does this mean? Well, flight points will be as the crow flies. They will be from place to place, from city to city, from town to town. They will take you where you want to go in an efficient manner. I think that's been the biggest problem with flight points. Now, I still use flight points a lot, actually, because there's times where I just want to get from place X to place Y, not think about it, get off out of my computer, make a cup of tea, and come back. So flight points really do facilitate my habitual tea addiction, which is great. And I guess if they're shorter and more concise, then I'm going to have to get better at making tea, but that's just a downside I'm going to have in Warlords. Still though, if flight points are fixed, then there you go. One of the major reasons for flying mats being there in the first place is gone. And this is one of those situations where I think that, yeah, there are one or two cons to removing flying, but I think the cons that flying itself brought in terms of how the game is consumed were far greater on the whole than the sort of benefits that flying brought. Yeah, they could do. There could be cool stuff here. There could be cool stuff here. Of course, we do need to see how the outdoor objectives are done in Draenor. We need to see how the quests are done and that kind of thing. But, oh yes, one other point that just came into my head that I didn't even think about beforehand, but the way the quest flow in Draenor is going to be a bit different. Essentially, we're going to have little secondary objectives that are a little bit more Guild Wars 2 in style. So, say you go up to a fortress and, like one of those objective things the game has just pops up and says, hey, help conquer the fortress, kill a bunch of dudes, do all this stuff, go. And it's going to be far more optional. It's not going to be the case in which you go into a town, pick up a million different side quests which take you to loads of different places, and if you're on a ground mount, that would be annoying because you'd be just ground mounting from quest location to quest location to quest location, spread out all over the place. However, since those like side quests are going to be just removed and put into that kind of Guild Wars 2 Renown Heart style, then hopefully, and because they're more optional, that won't be as annoying. And then the mainline quests, which you will have to do to progress through a zone, will be very much designed so that travel is not a hindrance. I think another thing that Bashiok said as well is that they are definitely aware that they haven't always done a great job in making zones fun to travel on ground, even in, say, like, I don't know, the Dread Wastes or a part of an expansion where you were forced on the floor. They still don't really think that they've done that perfectly. Just look at Dread Wastes. Just look at that. Ugh, I don't like Dread Wastes. I think that actually the Valley of the Four Winds was done pretty well in that regard. You could generally just stay on the footpath, go from place X to Y, and be pretty happy about it. So I think it's going to work out on the whole to be really good for the game. I think that also people need to realize that while in terms of the way the game currently is, it would be very inefficient to go everywhere on a ground mount, but in Draenor, I think it's still going to be just as efficient and it's going to feel fine. They know you won't be going from place to place as fast as you currently do, in terms of just going maybe a 200 or 300 meter distance. I think that because of the new flight points, you'll still, on the kind of large scale, travel very fast, but in terms of moving around within a zone, they know you're going to be a bit more slow than if you were flying. And because of that, they will be able to up the scale of rewards appropriately and do things like that to ensure that you still get a very rewarding experience for the time you put in. That's great. And I think that fundamentally, if anyone is just kind of going around saying, oh, I just want to fly, I want to be able to, skip to the very end of this quest, I don't want to have to deal with a lot of the design decisions and things that Blizzard do, then I think you really need to ask yourself why you're playing the game. Because if your primary objective is to skip the content, then maybe the game isn't for you. I think, really? Or maybe only raiding is for you or something like that. In which case, I think you're still going to be fine with raiding, because I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a flight point extremely close to every single raid instance. In that case, it won't affect you. So I think that this is going to be a win-win, and that people just need to calm down a little bit, see how the beta test goes, and take a more reasonable and balanced approach. Just remember, Draenor will be different to Pandaria, it will be different to Cataclysm, and it will be different to Wrath of the Lich King. And those differences are what's going to make ground mounts okay for the duration of the expansion. I'd be pretty pissed if they just turned off flying in Pandaria because of the way Pandaria is designed. So hopefully this is something they can solve through solid game and world design. Anyway, that's going to be it from me. I very highly recommend just going to YouTube, typing in Mike Preach WoW. He's one of my favorite YouTubers, actually. I've really been enjoying his stuff lately. Go and watch his most recent video on it, because he also makes a lot of really valid points, and it's just very good to listen to. Alright, so with all that done, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.